Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the very second episode of the Extra Time FC podcast. I'm your host, Owen, my co-host, Junior, next to me. And today we'll be talking about PSG winning the Intercontinental Cup over Flamengo, the FIFA Best Awards, did Rafinha get robbed? And we'll also be talking about Barca and Madrid's very poor performances. So to start it off, PSG get the job done in Doha against Flamengo on penalties. Junior, what are your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I think that this game is one of them where it's you just sort of take the result and that's all that really matters. And honestly, that's how I sort of take it. I don't think that we were all that good overall. Like definitely think we deserved to win. We definitely did enough. Like just quickly looking at the stats, we had 23 shots, 9 shots on target, 2 big chances created. But it's not like, PSG, played some, exuberant, like electric football and whatnot. But we definitely did what we need to do. We made things difficult for ourselves, giving away the penalty and, not, ending the game within, regulation. But hey, all's well that ends well.
Yeah, I thought there were some good individual performances, Safanov, but there were some bad ones. I thought Marquinhos was really poor. I thought Fabian was poor. Due, I thought was poor. But the performance that really stands out to me is Safanov. I think that, I mean, that begs the question, is he going to fight for a spot over Chevalier?
I think it definitely goes in. I think what you'd argue is that you definitely can't bench him based on his recent performances, both the league, the Intercontinental Cup, the Champions League as well. He's done well, but I still think that like if you ask Lucho right now, long term, I still think he has Chevalier as his number one. I still think that Chevalier has more potential than him. I think that if we see the peak of both keepers, I think that Chevalier is a better keeper overall. And on top of things like with the ball at his feet, I still think Chevalier is better. But I think definitely based on recent form and purely thinking of this meritocratically, I do think that Safanov should be starting over Chevalier, at least for the next recent couple games.
Yeah, and another thing I want to talk about is the fact that I feel like PSG haven't been in recent games like playing as much as a team as they were last season. I feel like we're relying on sometimes individual brilliance, which I mean we have that, but I think there's too much of that we see nowadays.
I mean, I'd probably have to push back. I don't necessarily. I think definitely we're not like as cohesive as we were last year, but I would also argue that we've not been seen like as injury riddled as last year. And the fact is that if you just go and look at it and you think it more so as of Luis Enrique during his time at PSG, this is arguably his best start to the season at PSG. I think we need to remember the first year. Yes, we were doing pretty good in the league, and even then, I remember we lost, to Nice. We lost a couple games. He drew his first 2 games in the league. We were in a precarious situation. It's the first Champions League campaign. That was the one where we were in the group with, AC Milan, Newcastle, and Dortmund. Yeah, that year, like we took it at the end. We only they qualified basically on the final day because of AC Milan doing us a favor and whatnot. Last year, obviously, we saw what happened, finishing 15th and whatnot. Like this year, arguably, you'd say, okay, yes, we're second in the league, but again, by 1 point, we're top 3 in the Champions League. So we're in a better position currently. And I'd much rather have like what we've done on the recent years with Luis Enrique, where we start the year off a bit slower, but then in the second half of the year, that's really when things go into gear. Whereas before, like if we, for example, take the year before Luis Enrique got here, the Galtier year, we started the year off phenomenally, and basically going into the World Cup, I would say PSG was probably the most informed team. And then we saw what happened afterwards. So I'd much rather go through our growing pains currently and be bad, in quotations mark. We're still talking about a team that's, top 3 in the Champions League and, 1 point above being the top in their own league. Then, do everything, be Liverpool last year and get knocked out super early. But yeah. And also, on the second point though, the fact that we rely too much on individual brilliance. Like I think PSG, we've had 17 separate goal scorers this year. So if anything, it goes and shows that like our goals are very like our top scorer currently, I believe, is
Vitinha.
top goal. No, for most GA it's Vitinha, but top goal scorer, for example, is Gonzalo Ramos, and he's got 6 goals. We've got so
I
many
think
players on
Vitinha
4
has 7, if I'm mistaken.
goals.
I, you'd have to fact check me, but
Maybe he does. Let me quickly have a look at Vitinha's stats.
6 goals. He's got 6 goals, 9 assists.
Oh,
That's what it says on
I'm seeing
FotMob.
5 here. On FotMob this season.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm seeing 5 and 8, at least on Transfermarkt.
Oh, that's
5 goal.
including the Club World Cup. Sorry, I don't know why FotMob does that. They include the Club World Cup.
Yeah, no, 5 goals. I'm seeing 5 goals and 8 assists.
All right, what are we seeing for Ramos there?
I just know Ramos has 6 goals for PSG. So Ramos is our top goal scorer. Then you go and you look. I think like Doué's on 4 goals. You got like I think Barcola's on
I
5.
know, but if you
Kvara's on 5.
if you take the goals that we have scored, you take some of the goals last season, like the 2 goals at Villa Park. Those are team goals. I feel like a lot of the goals we've had have come from individual moments, like the Doué goal against Mets. He's taking the ball from the opponent's from our box and scoring. The Vitinha goals. I mean, those are 2 world-class goals. Like I feel the
Okay, but what
Kvaratskhelia
about
goal against Atalanta, like that's another individual quality goal.
Okay, but then take, for example, the goal that we scored against Flamengo. It's a brilliant, winning the ball on the other side. Mayu plays it across to Doué. Doué, good ball in to Kvara. The keeper makes a however we score. You go and you take the goal that, for example, we scored against Barcelona. The amount of passes we had there. Some of the goals we scored against, like as in even like the goal against Mets, the first comes off a free kick and whatnot. Like there's also been a lot of team goals that have come as a result of that. Like PSG is a team which like. It's probably the only PSG player to not have scored, like outfield player to not have scored yet for PSG this season is Lucas Hernandez. Apart from that, every other player scored, like main, player that you go and say. So I don't know. I can't really go and say that we're reliant on individual brilliance. If you mean by like, oh, it's not like building up, then okay, maybe. And even I would say it's a stretch. But typically, when you think of like an example of a team I think that is super reliant on individual brilliance would be Madrid. They are reliant on basically Mbappe going and producing a moment of magic. Whereas PSG, if you want to say it's individual brilliance, but that individual brilliance can come from several different players, whether it's, Doué, Dembélé, Barcola, Kvara, Lee, whoever it may be. They can all go and have that individual brilliance.
That's a fair point. But to talk about the Flamengo game more, is there any main issues you see in the team? Because I feel like the recent performances against Mets, it wasn't great. Against like Monaco, it wasn't great. Against Bilbao, wasn't great. Against Flamengo, we weren't great. So like these, you take the last 3 games, Bilbao, Mets, Flamengo, we haven't been. This isn't. These aren't great performances. And after Saturday, the Coupe de France game, we'll have like a 2.5. I think we'll have a 2-week break. I think our next game is January 4th after Saturday, so we'll have that break to like regroup. But what's your thoughts on the recent performances we've had?
Well, I think it goes back more so to like further. Like I would go and say like you could argue back. I think the last probably concrete, comfortable performance was probably Rennes. But then, okay, you go and say that. But even outside of that, that was an outlier. The last like big, comfortable performance you could argue from PSG was probably back in October against like Brest when we won 3-0. Like when right before Doué got injured. Because you go back to Lorient, the 1-1 draw, that was a poor performance by us. Nice, even though Nice played some disgusting terrorism ball, that was not the greatest performance. Obviously, in the loss against Bayern, the game against Lyon, even though we won that game, that wasn't our best performance. Le Havre, you could go and say that was a bit more, comfortable. The game against Spurs, I would argue overall wasn't a good performance, and it was more so Vitinha had, a generational
The game against
performance.
Leverkusen, for like the first 35, 40 minutes until like we scored those late 2 goals in the first half, it wasn't great.
Yeah, but I guess Leverkusen, you go and say in the second half, you definitely were the better team.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
even
second half
Leverkusen, you're
was
going back
definitely
to like,
different.
October 21st. But as in, I think the reason, it's just the fact is, it's just the injuries and the fatigue. As in, you go and you look at PSG, really, like, PSG have had what? You'd argue, like, a couple weeks off since basically. And so if you take a player like a Dembele or a Barcola, for example, right? They played. But let's take Barcola, for example, because Barcola, I think, is a really good case study. You had Barcola who played basically the entirety this season,
I
having
think
very little
Vitinha
breaks.
might be a better example of like fatigue, like you were saying, because he played the Champions League final, then he played 2 Nations League games, then the Club World Cup, then we had like a 2-week break or a week break, played the Super Cup, and then just played the whole season so far.
Yeah, but even like for the Vitinha, you also look, so all of last season, obviously the Club World Cup, afterwards the Nations League as well, but even the season before, you would argue that maybe he had a break in like in between the seasons. Before that, he had the Euros, right? So that means that his summer break was truncated, and then before that, again, like it's only game upon game upon game, and so PSG have not really had an opportunity to go and just rest and allow their players to go fully play. And then on top of that, the fact is that like PSG still this year have not put up their strong, like their Champions League winning lineup yet, right? There's always been at least most times one, two, three players. Like arguably, yes, you could say it's probably the closest thing we've gotten to, getting where you got basically everybody fit and ready to be able to go and play. But again, even yesterday, you have Hakimi still not there, so I think there's that as well. But I think the biggest thing is just fatigue. Fatigue.
Yeah, I think fatigue and like you said, the injuries too. Hakimi being out for a little bit, Marquinhos being out for a little bit, Chevalier being out for a little bit, even though Safanov and Zaire may have put in shifts. Mendes was out. Some of our midfielders was out. Joao Neves, Fabian was out for a little bit. Our front, against Barcelona, we didn't have any players in our front three.
Hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think that's that. I mean, I'm sort of like, especially these last couple games of the season, it's just like just get the points and that's it. I don't really care about the performances really right now. Um, and I mean, it's sort of echoed with what Luis Enrique said. He does his like Vitinha also said, like we've had a bunch of injuries. You've not had all our players together and been able to get on a run of games. I think once that happens, that is when things are going to become serious. So, um, I think, yeah, I think the break is gonna do our players good. Hopefully, like tomorrow or whenever it is Saturday in the Coupe de France game, it's not easy. You play the kids and whatnot, and hopefully by halftime you're up a couple goals, so you don't need to bring on the cavalry, or if you do, you bring them on for a cheeky 10-15 minute cameo, and then send them on their merry ways for Christmas break and allow them to go and fully rest and then come back in January to go and get ready with the league. First league game is against Paris FC, I
And
believe,
then
on the
we have
4th.
that Trophy des Champions final against Marseille. That would be
Exactly.
a big one because we have our
Uh-huh.
game on Saturday, December 20th, and their next game is January 4th against Paris FC.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, so the good thing is that we'll have a good break in there. So it should do us well. And also we're facing a Marseille who, even though I guess you would argue PSG also are going to be, well, Hakimi won't be there and Ibrahim and Bai won't be there, but Marseille especially, they're going to have a lot of their key players gone due to AFCON.
yeah, I think Aubameyang will be gone, if I'm
Yeah,
correct.
I think
Um,
Aguerd as well will be gone. Their center back. Yeah, they'll have quite a few players missing. Whereas PSG, I think everything should be sort of all guns blazing and everybody should be back. Bar
if you go to,
Hakimi.
if you go to Marseille's team, they have their players. They will have, let's see, country players. Assuming these players got called up, one of the defenders, Yakin said Emadi. He's from Comoros. I don't know if that's in Africa. Geoffrey Khan. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. He's Africa. Aguard, Morocco. Um, Ivory Coast are in Afcon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Traore, one of their midfielders. Nadir, another one of their midfielders. Guri, Algeria. Angers Lago, another player out for AFCON. And Aubameyang, he's out for AFCON. So they have one, two, three. Assuming these players got called up to the squads. One, two, three, four, five. Six, seven, eight. They'll have 8 players out. And some of these players might not just get playing time, but that's depth gone. So if you get injuries or whatever, that's players gone.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the next topic that we can cover is the FIFA World Pro 11. And where, where do we begin? Where do we begin? I think we just go straight off the bat, what everyone wants to know. Rafinha being taken out. That is next level disgraceful.
As in, I think the award itself. So the thing is that it's bizarre because unlike the Ballon d'Or, right, which is purely voted on by journalists, this is voted upon by players or captains of all the national teams, coaches of those national teams, fans, as well as journalists. So everyone gets, or in the media, so everybody gets a 25% share. And in all of that, you go and you see, yeah, Rafinha didn't go and get it. I think that is definitely big. But I think the bigger thing is like how somebody like Jude is getting Jude Dogligham. What is he doing there?
What? Jude? I don't personally I don't think Van Dijk should have been there either.
No, but the thing is with Van Dijk, you can hear it though. Like Van Dijk makes sense. Like it's not
Premier
crazy.
League winner, very good center
Yeah.
back. I want to put someone like Bastoni over him, but that might just be me.
No, I think Van Dijk's fine. Like I don't. But the thing is, like nobody had an issue with Van Dijk being there. Like I think
Some did,
they might say,
a lot of people threw shade at Bellingham for being there, and that I thought Barca PR was bad. That might be next level for Madrid PR.
Nah, that's next level. Next level. But Madrid PR went and said to Barca PR, "Hold my beer. I've entered the town." Like that is ridiculous. Like at least even like I also don't think Cole Palmer should have. Like I think the midfield three should have been Vitinha, Pedri, and João Neves.
Me, I put it out. I would have put a 4-2-4 because there was too many good attackers. I would have put Donnarumma in goal, Hakimi at right back, Pacho and Bastoni as the two center backs, Mendes at left back, and then you have Vitinha and Pedri as the two midfielders, and then the front four: Rafinha, Dembele, Yamal, either Mbappe or Salah. To be honest.
All right. I mean, yeah, I probably would have gone with the traditional 4-3-3. Similar to them, I would have put Donnarumma in goal, right back Hakimi, left back Nuno. I would have put a center back pairing of Van Dijk and Pacho, and then midfield three, Pedri, Vitinha, João Neves. Front three, I put Dembele through the middle, Yamal on the right, and Rafinha on the left. That would have been.
But what makes it even worse for them is the fact that they put a 4-4-2 and you're putting Pedri as the left mid. Like if that was an actual formation, it would not work.
Well, I think they're playing the 4-4-2 like almost like with a diamond, right? So I think they would have done like you go and you think, okay, the back line as it is, you maybe put Vitinha as the deepest lying player. You'd have a double pivot of like a Pedri and Bellingham, and then you'd have Palmer at like the 10. It's like / cam roll. And then obviously, whatchamacallit, Dembele and Yamal as your sort of front two. But the thing is, the also issue is that I've got, and a bigger issue is like the inconsistencies. So obviously you've talked about, the 11 now, but then you look at, the best player and whatnot. The fact is that Kylian Mbappe fugazied himself into the top 3, yet wasn't in the 11. So Mbappe, according to, the world of football, fans, media, coaches, captains, is one of the best 3 players last year, but he's not good enough to make into the 11. Make that make sense. That legitimately makes no sense.
I see people complaining about Dembele winning it, which I just don't understand. I think Dembele was the deserving winner. I think a lot of people don't really have a problem with the winner itself. It's the fact that Rafinha's just. I don't think Rafinha was in the top 5. Was he in the top 5? I know he wasn't in the top 3.
Oh, I mean, you have to go back. As in, you can go back and somebody's probably tallied up, the votes for everything. But you can go and you can look at how all the captains, coaches, and media's voted individually. So, for example, Messi in his put Dembele number 1, then he put Mbappe number 2, and Yamal number 3 in his personal voting as the captain. One that's very interesting. For example, Hakimi, for example, put Mbappe number 1, Dembele number 2, and then I think he put Yamal number 3. So or Vitinha or something like that. So you can go and you can see how each captain, coach, and whatnot voted. But I had a quick look at it. I did not see a lot of Rafinha. I know that, for example, I know Marquinhos for Brazil, the captain for Brazil, he put Rafinha number 2. But I didn't see a lot of people putting Rafinha in their podium, and so I think that's why.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up the top 5 list here. Wow. So, based off official voting results, Dembele was first, Yamal was second, Mbappe was third, Hakimi was fourth, Rafinha was fifth. That is that is not great. Like, and the weird thing for me is Vitinha finishing outside the top 5 when he was top 3 in the Ballon d'Or. And I just pulled up the top 10. Apparently, the top 10. This is based off ChatGPT, so I don't know how accurate this is. But Dembele first, Yamal second, Mbappe third, Hakimi fourth, Rafinha fifth, Salah sixth, Vitinha seventh, Harry Kane eighth, Nuno Mendes 9, Pedri 10th. What's your thoughts on that list, Junior?
I mean, it seems pretty consistent with the Ballon d'Or, you go and say. Right?
I just don't understand. Like, people are gonna like.
I'm trying to find here. Where did you?
I'm partially blaming Barcelona fans for this. I'm gonna send Barca fans their blame for this. Barca fans spent months. I saw Barca fans talking about some Rafinha is nothing without Yamal. Look at Rafinha without Yamal. Rafinha doesn't have the individual brilliance without Yamal. I saw too many Rafinha hate from Barcelona fans, and then they sit there and cry when Rafinha's not picked for the best 11. Did Rafinha deserve to be picked for the best 11? Absolutely. Is it partially your fault for sitting there bashing him to boost Lamine Yamal? Again, absolutely.
Exactly, I agree. Like, I mean, I was going and listening to some or people. It's like I knew it. I was saying from the get go back in May that if you're Barcelona, listen, I was always saying that if you like, I thought that Rafinha was going to be like, if you went and said you think the Rafinha deserved Ballon d'Or for Dembele, I still disagree. But like, I could hear it. I mean, you could match sporting wise. He was much more of a challenge to Dembele winning the Ballon d'Or. The Yamal stuff, like, it made no sense. And the fact is that for most of the season, right, you go and you look for Barcelona, and I said it then, and I will continue to go and say it now. We saw that most Barca fans were pushing Rafinha. Basically, up until you would say February, it was Rafinha Ballon d'Or. Rafinha and Mo Salah were the two candidates that were coming out for the Ballon d'Or. Then, Pedri had his little stint, and then obviously you had the 2 games against Inter, and then, the Yamal stuff came out. They got touched by the spirit of Yamal, and all of a sudden, Ike Flays, dribble, shimmies, came up over them, and it was Yamal this, Yamal that, to the point where then, Rafinha, he's just a GA merchant, and then, for example, you bring up the fact that you go and you look last year, even though Yamal, you think, Yamal's a big chance creator, he does all this, so on and so forth. First and foremost, both of them had the exact same amount of assists for Barcelona. If you look at all competition, they had the same amount of assists. Rafinha created more chances, had more chances created, had more big chances created. I think he was the more clutch player for them. If you go and you look at, for example, the amount of game-winning goals or goals that he was involved in that won Barca games or got Barca a point, he was the most involved in it. You want to talk about big performances? He had big performances against Madrid, against Bayern, against a bunch of other clubs in the Champions League, Copa del Rey, League, etc., so on and so forth. But no, they went and pushed him. And even if you go and you look, in La Liga,
not to mention the fact Rafinha won the Liga Player of the Season.
Exactly. And in the Liga, I think they were pretty neck and neck. I think if not anything, Yamal may have had one more man of the match compared to him. But you would go and argue in that season, Yamal was not, at least definitely in the league, the best Barca player. You would argue, you could make the case that Rafinha was better than him. You could even make the case that Pedri was better than him. And in the Champions League, there's no question, there's no debate there. Rafinha was miles better than Yamal over the course of the entire Champions League campaign. So in the two most important competitions that Yamal and Rafinha shared, Rafinha was the better player. But, they gaslit us into believing, no, you guys are wrong, no sabe. Rafinha, no, Rafinha no es posible without Yamal, this, that, and the other. And then obviously this year, I think what's happened is that this year they've seen Barcelona without Rafinha because of his injury. And now they've realized that, you know what, he's actually pretty important to us. And then also because of the fact that they felt that he got snubbed in the Ballon d'Or, then they tried to change their tune. So I don't know how, on the one hand, they were going and pushing Lamine Yamal Ballon d'Or back in October to try to get him to win it, and now they're going and saying no, we want Rafinha. This is why I say this community, they're hypocrites. They don't know where they want to go.
Like you said, the stats for Barcelona last season, Rafinha. This is just based off club. Rafinha, This is off transfer market. 34 goals, 26 assists, 60 GA in 57 games for Barcelona. Lamine Yamal in 55 games, 18 goals, 25 assists. A difference of 17 goals and assists in the span of 2 games. And they wanted Yamal to get the Ballon d'Or over Rafinha.
As in, listen, I mean, some people they'll go and argue that because they'll go and say, people love talking about Barca PR, but then they'll go and say, well, why didn't Yamal or Rafinha? Why didn't they win anything? And I go and say, like, okay, two things. The two aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. Barcelona can have some disgusting fugazi PR, which they do, but ultimately, like, they could have pushed as much as the Yamal, but ultimately, if you actually go and you look at it objectively, Yamal did not deserve to win the Ballon d'Or. And yes, a lot of that PR, it boosted him, and I thought unduly boosted him. I think the fact that he finished second is a travesty to football. So that's an example of where it worked. What I'm saying is that if that PR had been put onto Rafinha, I think it would have been a lot closer because you can make a very good case for Rafinha. You can make a case that, for example, in the Champions League, that he was arguably the best player in the Champions League. You can make that case. And then based on that, you can go and say, well, just like Dembélé, he won everything domestically, and the only difference is that one won the Champions League, the other didn't. But it'd be a lot closer. Whereas with Yamal, first and foremost, like you have to argue whether he was the best player on his team. Like even in La Liga, you could make the case that last year Mbappe was better in La Liga over him. So how are you going to go and tell me that a player who in his own domestic competition was not the first, not the second, arguably not the third best player? And then in the Champions League, let's not even get there. There's he wasn't even the best young player in that competition. So it still baffles me as to how he got there. But again, going back to the Madrid PR, I still don't understand how Mbappe is finishing top 3 in the voting for the best awards.
I mean, I think the Golden Boot is what got him there.
No, but as in my question is, if he is deemed, right? I'm looking here on just Wikipedia's article on this. So Dembélé got the best award. He had 50 votes or first place votes or however the percentage of points he got. He got 50%. Lamine Yamal got 39, whereas Mbappe got 35. So the gap between Yamal and Kylian Mbappe is smaller than the gap between Dembélé and Yamal, right? So that means that, and we don't know who was fourth after that, or I can't see who's fourth here. But so Mbappe by the footballing world at large, the coaches of the national teams, the captains of the national teams, the medias, and the fans as well, is deemed to be the third best player last year. Fine. However, in the best 11, he can't find a spot in there. That's what I don't get.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But I mean, like you said, I think Mbappe finishing top 3. I think that's disgraceful, and especially given the first half of the season Mbappe had. I mean, Madrid fans were talking about, yo, get this guy out of here already. The bad performance against Liverpool. There was 10 offsides against Barcelona. Like that first, I'd say quarter of the season, he was tragic. And then Madrid going trophyless. It's not like he won Madrid anything.
True. I mean, I guess again, you can say that the Golden Boot, the amount of La Liga goals and whatnot, all that comes into play for sure. But the thing I agree with you. I don't think he should be anywhere near the top 3, arguably not even near the top 5. But again, it's like if you are going to say that he's the top 3, he should be in the 11. It's like I think last year, for example, Courtois was given the keeper of the year, but Martinez was in the best 11. Like, how does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that was crazy. And Courtois deservingly so got the keeper of the year. I think that was deservingly so. They won the Champions League that year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Lunin was the main part of that because Courtois was out for a little bit. He was out for all the knockouts until the final. But, Madrid, they won La Liga. They won. I'd probably say Courtois is still the best goalkeeper in world football right now. So I think that was understandable. Martinez, I mean, you want to talk about 2022 World Cup, living off of it. Yeah, I think Martinez is living off that World Cup.
No, absolutely.
He's living off something that happened as of today, as we're recording this video, 12/18/2025, 3 years ago today.
Yeah, I'm just wanting to go and see here what the votes were for maybe it's the fact so Mbappe to go and see. So funnily enough, I'm going and saying so for the FIFA the best men's award, at least according to is this the fans one that I'm seeing? Let me make sure that I've got this. Okay, so I think this one was just voted. Yeah, it was by the panelists and then by the fans. So according to the fans, Dembélé had the most points with 26. Yamal was second with 22. Haaland was third with 17, and Mbappe was fourth with 16. So I think it might have been due to the fact, like a Fugazi thing of Mbappe was counted as a forward, whereas Cole Palmer was third in the voting, and so was Jude Bellingham, but they were midfielders. So I think they were just like even then I don't understand. So Palmer got 20 votes, whereas Mbappe got 16 votes. I think that's what's done it for them. But ultimately, it was that Cole Palmer was considered a midfielder compared to Mbappe, who I mean, he was an attacker.
Yeah. I think Palmer being in there isn't that bad. Won the Conference League, won the Conference League Player of the Tournament, got top 4 in the Prem. Won the Club World Cup, won Club World Cup Player of the Tournament, got the man of the match in the final. So there's some slight sense to Palmer being in there. Bellingham wasn't the best player on his team. Like I've tried to think on why Bellingham's there. I can't wrap my head around it. There's no logical explanation for Jude Bellingham being in the FIFA best 11.
I think the only reason is it's PR. He's living off of the Euros. He's living off the fact he's English. It's all that. It's all the Madrid PR, English PR. Yeah, but even he'd tell you he didn't have a great season last year. He wasn't good last year.
He didn't have the 23-24 season where in 23-24 when Rodri won the Ballon d'Or and Vinicius were second. I personally said that Bellingham should have won it. Helped England get to the final. Madrid won Champions League and La Liga. So I would have given the Ballon d'Or to Bellingham that year. If England won it, he definitely would have won it. But I think it's just disgusting. It's disgusting.
Yeah, I agree.
But speaking of Real Madrid and Barcelona, we should talk about their Copa del Rey performances. Are these performances concerning in your opinion?
I think it's concern. Well, I'd argue it's more so concerning for Madrid than it is for Barca, just because I think that they're in a worse run of form in comparison to one another. As in ultimately for Barca, and again looking back at the game, it's a game where like Barcelona dominated. So like just looking at it's a game where the other team, they sat really deep. They defended really low. Barcelona had a bunch of chances. So looking here, Barca had 82% possession, had an XG of 1.85, 21 shots, 9 shots on target, 4 big chances created. And ultimately, it's just like their keeper had a good game. Barcelona wasn't really getting good in front of goal. And they just were unclinical. Whereas Madrid needed, some last moment heroics, a penalty, an own goal, to go and beat
the open play goal that Mbappe scored. That's a mistake from the keeper.
Exactly, it's a mistake. So as in basically you're going and saying Madrid is fully reliant on Mbappe, whereas Barca, I think it's more so like
penalty, was it really a penalty? There's no VAR in that round. If there's VAR,
I think that one it was just an interpretation of the rules. So it was a similar call. You remember that we had a game against, was it Metz? It was Metz. No, it was Brest. Remember where the ball went, it hit off Kang's like body and then hit his arm afterwards, and they deemed that a handball. It's the same thing that basically happened here. The player
hits off his head.
Tape off his head and then hits off his arm. I just don't know. Like I feel like this rule has been changed, mangled with so many times. So I actually do not know at this point what the actual rule is. But seemingly they ruled it off for that. The fact is they deemed that because he hit it and it hit his arm, that it was a penalty. Yeah. But yeah, I definitely go and say that overall it's more concerning for for Madrid, given that they're poor on a form and their reliance and dependence on Mbappe.
Yeah, I think Barcelona's. I agree with what you said. I think Barcelona's performance is less concerning because there were some good moments. Barcelona, Ter Stegen, he had some good moments. I thought Marc Bernal was really good. I've heard Barca fans. Barca fans they have a typical thing of gassing up their players, but he looked good. He looked really good. I thought Rashford. I think Rashford has to be a signing in the summer for Barcelona because he's on loan right now. I think they need to make that signing. But what's something that Real Madrid, or sorry, not Real Madrid, Barcelona are doing? I feel like they're running Lamine into the ground. Lamine Yamal is not a player that needs to spend 90 minutes on the football pitch against a third division team.
Yeah, and I think that's been one of the biggest criticisms that's been labeled at Hansi Flick is that, especially with knowing Lamine Yamal's relatively recent injury history, do you need to play him for the full 90 minutes and whatnot? Maybe it's to keep him fit. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe like Lamine Yamal wants to be on and whatnot. But yeah, I agree that there's no point in reason to go and do so. And I already know like some Barca fans are going to anticipate and they go and say, well, why is Mbappe also playing 90 minutes? There's a pretty big difference between the Yamal case and the Mbappe case. For one, Mbappe hasn't had any injuries and whatnot. And for two, I think Mbappe was there. And I think Xabi Alonso's been playing him because Mbappe is currently like 2 goals off breaking Ronaldo's record for the most goals scored in a calendar year by a Real Madrid player. So I think that's why he's there.
Xabi Alonso is legitimately one loss away from getting sacked, while Hansi Flick, I think Hansi Flick could lose like 5 games in a row and he wouldn't be sacked. Hansi Flick is
arguably.
Hansi Flick is safe as of now. The only criticism he's really getting is the high line. Xabi Alonso's 1 game away from getting sacked. So Xabi Alonso got to do what he got to do. If that game gets taken to penalties, I think Xabi Alonso gets sacked. Mbappe is the reason Real Madrid didn't lose. But like we were talking about individual performances, I think Endrick was really good. I thought Endrick was really good that game. And the fact that he hooked him instead of Gonzalo Garcia is disgraceful. I don't know what Xabi Alonso has against Endrick. Every time Endrick plays, he does something. His passing yesterday, the trivela he had for one of Mbappe's big chances, that was a Lamine Yamal trivela. Like, literally. The fact that Endrick does not get more playing time, I think is disgraceful. And I think it's poor from Xabi Alonso. I would argue that Endrick is in the same situation that Federico Chiesa is in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that they're just not given any time at the club, which, as in, there's one part of me, and this sort of brings me back, and again, people are going to go and say, oh, why are you talking PSG? I'm sure you must have seen the rumors that Markov come out and said that, Madrid want to go all in for Vitinha over the summer. Right? They're making him... Yeah, their priorities. As in, I just don't get, like... I think obviously Madrid, the institution, you could argue that the biggest club, best club in history and whatnot. I think sometimes people overrate the pull that gives Madrid. Like for an Endrick, okay, yes, I guess you could argue that it worked out for Vinny, it worked out with Rodrigo and whatnot. But I would argue that first and foremost, Madrid back then were in a much healthier position, and even then, like Vinny was pretty fortunate that Hazard basically transfer completely flopped. And that Madrid just overall, the club was more stable and so could give, younger players a time. And the team was much more balanced. So you could fit a younger player and allow him to develop. Whereas now, there's chaos everywhere in Madrid. And you can't, if you're a Xabi Alonso, you can't afford to take a risk and play someone like an Endrick to go and test something out and whatnot. Because you need results. It's like, for example, Luis Enrique. Luis Enrique can go and afford to play in John to play an Mbaye, play a Matthias Jean-Jacques, play a Mayulu and whatnot. Because he's got the grace and whatnot because of what he's done previously, whereas Madrid can't do that. And that's why I go back to like the Vitinha one. It's like, and Endrick as well. Why? Like, what is in terms of your career? What do you have to gain to go to Madrid right then and there? Like,
Vitinha's won a lot. He's won the Nations League. He's won the Champions League. He's won. Portugal have a real shot at winning the World Cup. Vitinha is a decorated midfielder. There's no reason for Vitinha to go to Real Madrid.
Yeah, not even that. I'm just thinking of it like, unless Vitinha, the only thing I would say for that is unless Vitinha is like grew up a die-hard Madrid fan. Let's say he loved Ronaldo and wants to follow in his footsteps to go and be another Portuguese.
Like what Mbappe did, for example.
Yeah, like Mbappe wasn't, but like the thing is, Vitinha, it's like you're at PSG, you're at right now currently a better sporting project. You have a better team around you. Financially, you probably will get paid better at PSG. And I think one of the other things that people don't talk about is that ultimately, if you go to Real Madrid, and this is one of the criticisms I've sort of had of when Mbappe left, is okay, sure, Mbappe will go to Madrid. Mbappe will go and score a bunch of goals. Mbappe may even go on to win, Champions Leagues there. But ultimately, he'll just be known as another great player that went through Real Madrid. Like, it would take him, going and doing some crazy things to, for example, eclipse Ronaldo's legacy there, for example.
Mbappe,
whereas at PSG...
Even though Mbappe didn't really win the Champions League, win the ultimate goal at PSG, he's still considered in a lot of people's eyes the greatest PSG player ever.
Yeah. And whereas, so, okay, now, for example, let's say, for example, he decided to stay at PSG last year. You would have then been the big franchise key player to win PSG's first ever Champions League, win the treble sextuple in that year and whatnot. And that, I would argue that is more important as being known as the guy, the player for that club, rather than being, another great player for, Real Madrid. It's like, for example, as good as, for example, a Modric, for example, was, or Toni Kroos, or Benzema, for example, all great players and whatnot, and will be remembered. But ultimately, they were just another great players that went through Real Madrid, right? They still wouldn't go and touch the shadow, for example.
I would honestly argue with that, because a lot of people consider Modric one of the best, if not some Real Madrid. I don't think Modric is the best central midfielder of all time. I've always said it's Iniesta, but Modric, I mean, in terms of, I would say Zidane is Real Madrid's best midfielder ever. But in terms of a central midfielder, you could argue Modric and Kroos are the two best midfielders ever. I wouldn't say that Modric and Kroos are remembered for great players. They're Real Madrid fans who are begging for Kroos to retire. Madrid fans who really wanted Modric to stay instead of leaving for AC Milan. So I could understand Mbappe, but Mbappe's gonna when it's all said and done for Mbappe, he's gonna be one of the greatest players ever. People are already making arguments that Mbappe is already greater all time than Neymar. So look, if Mbappe doesn't do anything that Real Madrid, if he doesn't win Champions League, if Mbappe doesn't, win a Euros or win another World Cup, because Mbappe, the big thing he won it 7 years ago. He won the World Cup 7 years ago. That's the biggest trophy in football, but that's the only really main thing Mbappe has won.
But the point was more so to make is that, like, is it better? Let's say for example, let's just say for the sake of argument that he goes to Madrid and, for example, he's not able to. Let's say he does win a champ. Let's say he just wins one, or let's say 2 Champions Leagues in his entire stint around Madrid. Would it be better for him to have gone to Madrid? Yes, gone to the team, the super team, the team that everybody thinks is going to go win the Champions League week in, week out, win 2 Champions Leagues there, or stay at PSG, win the Champions League now. Let's say, for example, in time of the future, win another Champions League for PSG, be known as PSG's best ever player. Be like, whenever you think PSG, you think Mbappe right off the bat. Whereas you go to Madrid, now it's like, well, okay, even if he's able to go and do that, you'll go and still, people probably still will regard Ronaldo as being Madrid's best ever player all time, right? As in, there's also that in terms of your legacy. So that's what I'm saying for regards to Vitinha. Why would you go and you leave PSG, where you could argue already is potentially PSG's best ever midfielder? Stay there, stamp your legacy. If he stays, for example, for a couple more years, and PSG, for example, win another champ, he would be known as PSG's greatest ever midfielder. If he went to Madrid, as in, he wouldn't be, even if he goes and does well and wins, let's say 2 Champions Leagues there, I don't think people are going to go and start saying, oh, he's the best midfielder at Real Madrid. There's also things like legacy as well. Right? That's what, for example, people like, for example, Steven Gerrard are seen in such high regard, is that he stayed at Liverpool, is their best player. When you think of Liverpool, you think of Steven Gerrard off rip. That could have been the same thing with an Mbappe, for example, but he decided to go.
Another player that I feel like fell in to that category is like a Paul Pogba. Paul Pogba, I don't think he would have become Juventus' best midfielder. I mean, Juventus have some crazy good players. They've had, Andre Pirlo, stuff like that. Zidane played there. But in terms of like a central midfielder, the type of player he was, he could have been like, Paul Pogba, honestly, if he lived up to the crazy potential he had, could he have become one of Juventus' best players ever in terms of as a midfielder? Instead of leaving for a team like Manchester United, where he was probably going to be underlooked by a guy like Paul Scholes.
Well, I mean, I would say that there it probably is a bit different because Juve, in their own respects, have great big midfielders. You want to go look back at Michel Platini, who played as a 10, when Zidane, who played at Juve as well. So I think it's different there. But me, it's more so specifically looking at like your big Barca, Real, like those two, because you'd argue that there's probably the clubs you'd say that have the most pull. And going from PSG, for example, I'd argue that the PSGs, your Arsenals, your Bayerns currently, they all sporting wise are all relative to one another, at least specifically in the last like decade or so. You go and say, now, in terms of you go and you say, okay, if I have to go and build a legacy at a club, building your legacy at Barcelona and Real Madrid is going to be significantly harder based on the fact that other players have gone and done so. Whereas you come to PSG and already there's no question. Like you, for example, you go and you look at Neymar, for example. I go and say like he has probably a bigger legacy overall to PSG than he does at Barcelona, because at Barcelona he's always going to be seen as being under Messi's Suarez's shadow, whereas at PSG came and he was the main guy. Until a certain dictator came along, but yeah.
Yeah, I think Neymar, in terms of his peak, he might be remembered more as a Santos legend than anything. I think the best Santos player ever was Pele. I mean, Neymar is easily top 3.
I know. I still think. I think.
You got to think about it like this. You can't. Not only what Neymar did as a young player, winning them. I think he won them the Libertadores, got into the Club World Cup final, won them the Brazilian Serie A, won them the Paulista A1, and then he just came back and boosted his legacy by helping Santos not only fight out of relegation, but he got them into what's like the Europa League, the Sudamericana, the Europa League of South America.
Yeah, I mean, I'd still think that, unfortunately for Pele specific, I think that Neymar will be, just by the virtue, I think Neymar is just more globally known. Also that Pele's now, he's no longer with us, and that, Pele, when he was playing at Santos, his tapes are, very few and far between. So whereas Neymar, you can go and you can look up the Neymar highlights from back in his early Santos days, 16, 17, 18, 19 and whatnot. I think Neymar is definitely going to be a bigger. But the general point though is that like I don't unless you are a diehard supporter of that team. And again, just to harp on the Vitinha case, it's probably better for you to just stay at PSG, become a club legend there. You're just as competitive as Real Madrid, and when you retire from there, you will be seen as PSG's greatest ever player. So for even like PSG circles, even though Ronaldinho is seen is probably the better player, for example, to compare to Rai, who is an older generation and whatnot. I think collectively though, Rai is probably a bigger PSG legend by the fact that basically all his work was done at PSG in Europe specifically. So yeah.
Any other players you can make a good example out of that, and like why maybe like Vitinha shouldn't go there? There have been rumors down the line of Hakimi going there, because Hakimi is like best friends with Mbappe.
Yeah, I think probably similarly also to a Hakimi. I guess Hakimi, you could argue, was even more difficult. The fact is that I think Madrid also, they had sort of the expectation, or they thought that they would be able to go and also get Hakimi the following year to sign on a free from PSG, come back home and whatnot. And that's the thing. Hakimi actually, unlike hypothetical Vitinha, he is from Madrid. He grew up in Madrid. He went through their academy system, played for the first team, won a Champions League with Real Madrid. But I think also potentially with him, it's also that legacy is like, ultimately, if you go and you look at it from his perspective, Madrid basically kicked him out. Like they just didn't believe in him. They didn't think he was good enough. And then all of a sudden now he does actually get good enough. Then they're like, oh, come home. And they're like, hold on. Where were you when I, needed to develop and whatnot? You sort of kicked me off the curb and whatnot. And now that I'm good, all of a sudden now you want me. Whereas PSG, okay, obviously don't get me wrong. When PSG bought him, he was still arguably the best right back or ranked amongst them. But PSG bought him, we gave him time to progress. And even then, like, why would Hakimi currently, when Marquinhos leaves, and it's probably going to be a couple of years from now, Hakimi's going to be the club captain at PSG. He was there to help win PSG's first ever Champions League. Was there for the most successful era of PSG. And especially after his friends left, he will be known as the marquee cornerstone of it. If he goes to Real, of course, He'll be back at home. He's a Madrid fan, obviously, so on and so forth, and he knows the club and whatnot. But like again, in terms of your legacy, if he goes back to Madrid, it'd be difficult. Like even though I would argue already that he's a better intrinsic like right back than Carvajal in Madrid eyes, and then what he's done for Madrid, it's going to be very difficult for him to eclipse what Carvajal did at the club. Whereas if he stays at PSG, I mean, let's say he stays a couple more years. Forget, obviously being in contentions for, best PSG right back ever. He can be in contention for the best PSG player point blank ever. And I'd say that's more important than coming back to Madrid and potentially having to battle just to be the best right back ever. So I think there's those things. Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah, no, it's just that. I just think a lot of the things, it's legacy. It's that I don't think, again, unless you are a big diehard Madrid fan, like for example, Mbappe, what is the point in going there then? And specifically, coming back to Endrick, it's that like maybe it wasn't like, again, I guess maybe it's the fact, I think he might have been maybe fooled and whatnot is probably the best word to go and use by the case of Vinny and Rodrigo. And even Vinny and Rodrigo, it took him especially Vinny, took him a couple of years to really get into that Madrid 11, and he struggled at first. I don't think it's wisest for him to go straight from a Palmeiras straight to a Real Madrid. I think he should have done like what Brazilians in the past did, what Ronaldo, R9 did, what Ronaldinho did, go to a PSG, go to a PSV initially, where there's not the pressure, where you are going to be guaranteed more game time, and then afterwards make your big money move to Real Madrid, Barcelona, etc.
I saw a thing a few months back. Mbappe was talking about when he left Monaco. He had all the big clubs after him, but he said he always wanted to go to Real Madrid, but he knew at the time he wasn't going to get enough playing time. He wasn't going to get enough playing time to develop into the player, he is now. So he said, I'm going to join PSG. That's what he did. I mean, look, you could argue Mbappe is the best individual player in the world right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing you can't take away from Mbappe's career, okay, maybe not last year and whatnot, but his career planning overall has been pretty good. Going from Monaco, which big club in France respectively, but going to the bigger PSG, which is right under Barcelona and Real Madrid, is probably just the tier right below them currently. Going there, developing there, playing there for years, and then ultimately making your step to Madrid. You could probably argue that he probably made the move to Madrid probably a bit later than he probably should have, with the benefit of hindsight. But all things considered, he made the right move initially, not going straight to Madrid. As you said, that he wouldn't have had the game time necessary to go and develop. So yeah, absolutely.
All right, boys. Thank you for watching episode 2 of the Extra Time FC podcast. We will be out for a little bit because Junior has to go back home, and I'll be busy. So we're trying to get the next podcast out as soon as possible, but it'll probably be out about mid-January. Thank you boys for watching. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, repost. I'll leave Junior and my links of socials in the description, and I will see you boys on the next episode. Thank you.